Hi. Thank you everyone for coming and thank you guys for doing this. I think we're going to have a really interesting and important conversation. Um, One of the reasons why we're here is obviously because we're all Latinos, because we're all interested in supporting the community that it's a minority, but we're also the largest minority in the U.S. So I'm going to read something to you guys. Latinx communities represent the largest ethnic minority in the U.S. with over 63 million people and growing. The median age of Latinx Americans is just 19 compared to 38 to the overall US population, making them not only, or making us not only, the future of America, but also the cultural vanguard. As you can see, I mean, there is definitely a takeover for Latinos in pop culture. Bad Bunny is killing it. Everybody wants to speak Spanish, and now it's actually cool to have an accent. I sadly lost mine a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, it's not just about that. It's also financially, Latinx individuals are the fastest growing consumer demographic in the U.S. with 3.4 trillion in projected spending power in spending power last year. So it's a figure that it could be the fifth economy worldwide if Latinos in the U.S. were a standalone country. And we discussed this during catch up before, but a lot of brands are spending big marketing budgets to reach the Latino population, but we haven't seen the same sort of interest in the art world or the same sort of representation or support. So that's something that we're going to be discussing today. So we have a little bit of a figure here. So in 2019, there was a study of 18 major American museums, and only 2.8 of the artists in their collections were Latinx. But we are 20% of the population and growing. So this number doesn't really add up. I think we share a sentiment here with the matron of salon that is a similar case for female artists also being underrepresented. So imagine being a female Latina artist and very, very underrepresented. But also, we think there's a lot of opportunity there. If there isn't, that kind of support already, there is a lot of opportunity for growth, and the only way is up. So I want to get us started with a question. What does Latinx visibility in the art world mean to you today? And is visibility enough? And I don't know who wants to start with this one. Perhaps Latina Museum.
I guess I will get started. Yeah. That is a big question to answer. I mean, visibility is support financially. Really having galleries look towards artists in many different arenas. Obviously, I think you look at blue chip artists and the circles that they kind of move in result in the same kind of circles that those artists move in, but that might not necessarily be where black and brown artists are that we commune with. And so kind of stepping out of their comfort zone, which may mean going into boroughs, neighborhoods, cities where they might not necessarily think to find those artists. And that's not even thinking beyond New York City, right? Beyond like the regional, but there are Latinx artists thriving, working in Ohio, right? Just stepping outside of your box. And is visibility enough? I mean, no. Visibility is never enough. It's great, it's helpful, but they need to be financially supported for sure.
Hey everybody! Oh wow! Okay, this thing's on. I mean, I think what I want to emphasize is that what's happening is that there is a groundswell and you can feel it, and it's palpable. And I think there's this kind of, we for Latinx artists, for our community, we want it to happen like right now, right? And I feel like it is, right? Something is happening, right? We could list it, right? There's Candida Alvarez. She's having an exhibition at the Museo del Barrio. She's in her 60s, 70s. We have Marcela Guerrero. She's a curator at the Whitney Museum. She's about to curate the Whitney Biennial. So we've got a curator on the ground that's going to be going all over the country looking at Latinx work, right? We have Karen here, who's like head of social media at the Met. When that news landed, it was like chills. I couldn't believe it. In terms of, I worked at the Met like 20 years ago. I was in like the bookshop, the gift shops. And now there's somebody that looks like me, that talks like me at the Met, and is representative of us, right? Is representative of this community, but now is also a key holder, right? So, I think that's a little bit of like kind of what's happening. You might not see a lot of that groundswell in terms of that organization, but it is happening. And it is a slow burn, but I guess another thing I want to say is that we're not waiting anymore, right? And I think all of us on this stage is our big component of that, right? That we're not waiting for that moment. We are that moment, and we're making those keys, I think, So I feel incredibly privileged to be here, to have that opportunity to talk, but also celebrate our fellow peers on the panel. That not only are we doing this together, but we're being advocates, the best advocates we can be. But also that we're not alone. There's a long lineage of fellow Latinos doing this before we were born. We're just picking up that baton along the way. You know what I mean? So.
Hey. No, I have to agree with the group. Obviously, disability is very important, but it's just like a stepping stone or like a brick in a building we're constructing, right? Patronage is where it's at, right? To create this legacy. I also feel like there's a lot of collections of Latinx artists that, because of different dynamics, people are very discreet with their collections. So I feel like when you're a patron, you should be vocal about the work that you're collecting and the legacy you're creating along with the artists.
Thank you. I also feel like during our catch up that we had, we talked about critical mass. And I think that right now in the cultural moment that we're living, where more and more people are interested through music or even culinary, they're interested in what we're doing. So I think more and more people start to identify with our culture, and maybe that's also what would bring them closer to supporting visual artists in the Latinx space.
Sure.
But one thing that I'm also interested in exploring is what kind of structural barriers are we facing? So the question is, as cultural leaders and curators, what are some of the most common structural barriers Latinx artists face when trying to break into institutional spaces?
Oh man, these are big, right?
All the barriers, every barrier, right? Access, financial. Speaking on access alone, just speaking for myself, I didn't grow up going to museums. I didn't grow up looking at art and thinking, oh, this is a sustainable career path for me. But I distinctly remember when I was at grad school for museum studies, I was in a very small class with maybe like 8 other people, and before the class got started, somebody was just talking about like, oh, I met with my parents and they showed me like when I was a child I had this book set of art history books over time, and it brought so many memories because she had it when she was really, really young, and that stuck in my brain because she was raised to think about art in that way, think about it in that way, in a way that I hadn't. And so that for me, this isn't any criticism of my parents.
Sure.
They came here to work and to help me thrive, and push me to do something that is financially stable for myself. And art was certainly, I think anyone would be afraid to go into art for the financial stability, right? We're not in this for the money, I guess, but we're hoping to it's pure passion. But that is such a huge thing, and how you see art when you're able to see it and see it for yourself.
Yeah. You can use this one.
It was up for living besides the whole time. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to add something to that, because there's also something that we discuss in how the Latin American communities haven't historically collected as like, let's say, the Europeans, right? Like if you look at numbers of, why people were collecting back in the day, like a typical household in Europe would have up to 20 artworks. I'm talking many years ago. Right now we need to work on getting more people to collect again and make it part of our culture. But it's a similar approach. It's the same for, maybe like Latinos in general. We might have like, we might be like a growing force in the economy, but it hasn't been historically part of our culture. Maybe that's why, like at this point, we've always been very close to our food. We've always been very close to our music, and maybe now it's gaining like that. It's getting to that level when it's contagious with the rest. So yeah, it's about like being patient but not waiting. Continuing working together and getting our forces together, uniting, which also brings me to another thing. And I feel like us as Latinos, we don't really have a cohesive identity. You mentioned that it's really hard to put us into a box because we're a very, very large community.
Sure.
Maybe a couple of years ago, I think we were all called Mexicans because, we're the closest country, but we're very diverse. We look very different from each other. We speak different to each other. We have different music. So is that something, that maybe we want to talk about? Like,
So one of the things I want to add, our galleries, our other projects is located in Santurce, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico obviously doesn't have the same dynamic as art collecting in the States. One of the biggest demystifying that we're doing is when we're talking to people, they don't think they can afford the art, when in fact they can. They can for that. So I think that continuous education to the people and to the community is also important to create more patrons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so much of I think the work that we're doing, like all of us here. So I'm part of Conaltura. I basically go from art fair to art fair. I don't have a physical space anymore. I'm basically solely online. But I think a lot of like the work I'm trying to do is center Latinx artists and our allies in the contemporary art context. And so much about this is about just educating the public that not only is this work available, but you need this work too. You need this in your home. Like you need to be a part of this. You need to be asking questions about this work. But the work's got to do that. The work's got to really move you, strike you. It's got to compel you to touch it, get close to it. But we also want to educate the public as well. That work is available, and yeah, you should want to be a part of it as well. So yeah.
You want something? Oh, no. I thought it was off. Is it? No. It's on. Okay. Which is really interesting because, like now, more than ever, I see artworks that are actually including elements that, are very important to our everyday life. I obviously see Clarisa's work, including certain elements that are telling our stories. So it's really important for us to support these narratives because that's a way to include our culture into these spaces that may not have traditionally represented us in the past, but it's a very important moment to like start bringing those discussions into these spaces. But I also would like to add a question about alternative spaces, like how are these enabling or alternative projects? I know that, for some time you didn't have a permanent space, now you have a permanent space, but like there's so many different opportunities for us to bring these artworks and artists closer to the communities, and it doesn't always look like the traditional, like white cube. How are these, helping solve these blind spots institutionally, but, what also could be improved from these?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a space on the Lower East Side in 2012. Had it for about 4 to 5 years. I got pushed out of the Lower East Side as the Lower East Side was growing, and I decided to come back 15 months ago. And I realized that for me, the best thing that I could do is just go to art fair and celebrate artists in this context. Like celebrate them, be their champion. And what better place? Because at these fairs, we're getting this kind of international kind of context, right? Like collectors from all over the world, curators, social media people, and it's unconventional, right? It's unconventional, but it's a way to reach the public directly. And we've noticed that, galleries in terms of here in New York, that kind of traffic has changed, right? So it allows me to be personally a little bit more nimble, right? I don't have to worry about having a physical space in New York, having to pay rent monthly. Now I can just go to, right, Future Fair in May, Nada Miami in December, and hopefully grow the business where I can get to go to Dallas, or I can get to go to LA, and just grow. And that's what's happening slowly, right? I mean, I think a lot of what this discussion is about taking a snapshot about where the Latinx community is in the contemporary art world. And although there is that groundswell and there is that energy, we're going through the growing pains. Like, we're going through the growing pains of, being key holders in terms of, like, at institutions, at places where Latinos can break through. And again, there's a longer lineage of this, there's a longer history of this, but now we're a part of that. You know what I mean? And that's why I say it's a privilege to be here, but also we're not waiting anymore.
You had mentioned this before already about we're not waiting anymore, and that going back to these alternative spaces, we're not waiting to be reached out to by these blue chip galleries, by these, big time people in power, curatorial, we are creating our own spaces and elevating our own spaces. I mean, there is the Latinx Project. I mean, the incredible work that they're doing. And now we're seeing some of the funding that's going behind it. I mean, they opened the curatorial, or they expanded, I believe, their curatorial fund. That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. And that is something that our community created for ourselves, and that's what it is. We are doing it ourselves, amplifying our own selves, elevating our own selves. We're not waiting for the approval, which is beautiful.
So I've been curating shows since 2013. So when I was 19 years old, my mom had a beauty shop, and because of her sickness of dementia, she had to retire. And we grabbed that space and we turned it into a gallery, because I had a lot of friends that were artists, but only 2 galleries were in Puerto Rico. So going back to what you were saying, yes, like it's double your work, right? To do it yourself, but once people see that you're doing it yourself, that's self-validation. It really, means something to a lot of people.
Thank you. I think that, from this sort of like question of alternative spaces, taking, I don't know the expression actually anymore, but taking the wheel in our hands, is that maybe a thing?
Yeah, sure.
We're like actually getting on the driver's seat, we're doing things ourselves. I think one interesting question or one interesting thing to think about is also social media, obviously. I recently saw a post that was talking about the number of followers that like any given museum, or let's say like the big museums and like the Met or the MoMA, also galleries, they have hundreds of thousands of followers, if not millions of followers. So how many people are actually visiting these museums? Like, the number is disparate, right? Like, there's so many more eyes on the content that's happening online. And it's not to say that we're going to like stop seeing it art in person, but it's really an important moment for these digital platforms and the power that they hold. And again, we're talking, social media is accessible to everyone. It's free. You can have it on your phone. Most people have a smartphone these days. It doesn't matter what kind of socioeconomical position you're in. You are on Instagram. So I wanted to see how we could use social media, or if you've used social media as a tool for advocacy and storytelling, and how can these digital platforms reshape institutional narratives around Latinx culture. And of course, we're going to get started with Latina in museums.
Let's shine that light, like right here. Let's just shine that light, like right now.
I mean, obviously, social media is an incredibly powerful tool, and I don't think that that's a surprise to anybody. We have seen movements come out from social media, for better, for worse, but we see people gather together under one idea. So for me, I use social media to kind of find community. I grew up in the suburbs outside of DC, and there was some diversity, but a little bit of non-melanated people, and so. Growing up, I kind of wanted to find community, wasn't really sure how, and I used social media to do that.
Right.
And now by this point, fast forward over 10 years, I have met people from all walks of life, from all over the country, doing all sorts of things in the art world, and it's incredible because I get to connect with them and see what they're doing, how they're growing in their career, whether it's an artist or someone in conservation or a curator. I mean, that is how we're amplifying the message together on social media, getting a larger reach. And like you mentioned, how many people walk in through the door of an institution versus how many people can you reach on social media? It's astronomically more. And so I have been very happy to see how to use that platform to talk more about artists that I see, to kind of just, it's easy enough to just share a post, to say, here's an artist having a show, share that post to your story, and now more people get to see and have, it goes back to that visibility, right? Like, visibility isn't the one and only thing for an artist, but it is a part of it. If we can provide that visibility for our own community, social media is such a beautiful place to do that. It's such a big, big place to do that.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to add to that, actually.
Yeah, I'm gonna just make a little addition here. I think that, when we're talking about patronage, visibility, all these kinds of support are huge, and especially, with the underrepresented communities. You might not always have the possibility to buy artwork, but you can always share on social media, and it goes a long way. The amount of times that I've shared shows and people have gone to see them, the amount of times that you reach out to an artist, you actually show that you care, you share their stuff, you like their stories, you like their posts. And then that's how we start to get more and more people involved, and we get more eyes on these communities that are basically not always represented in these spaces. Might not always have the solo shows in the galleries in Chelsea. They might not always be up at the museums, although we are getting there. But we're also out putting ourselves or putting our work on social media. So that's a great way to support it. And I totally back everything that you said, because I think it's very important to show community, not just in person, but not all of us live here in New York. Not all of us have the possibility of always visiting when somebody has an exhibition, but we're gonna try to go there, and we're gonna show support in different ways.
Yeah. Oh my God. So Karen is so humble, but let me just tell you, Karen communicates in a way that is so powerful. You know what I mean? She communicates the collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and she does it with such a flair, such a directness, that again, it's this is when we celebrate each other. This is when we kind of lift each other up, and I think this is what we're doing daily. We're celebrating each other, we're being advocates for each other, and we're pushing the work out. And I think that is part of that groundswell. That is part of that energy that is happening, and it feels so good to be a part of. And so we celebrate you, Karen. We see you, and we celebrate you, and
Didn't we meet on Instagram?
And we met on Instagram. So you know what I mean?
And here we are.
And here we are. And here we are together. Another person I want to celebrate too is Dr. Margarita Rosa. She's a trailblazing art historian, and she is on the ground. She goes to Art Expo. She celebrates work. She just a few days ago was celebrating the work of Vanessa German just across the street, but also does it with a flair and uniqueness that is distinctly Latinx, right? Distinctly us. And I'll just share a little bit more. So say, for example, Dr. Margarita Rosa, she was also, Savage Fenty reached out to her for a campaign, right? And she is now part of this amazing social media campaign run by Rihanna. And she realized, you know what? I want to do this. And not only that, Savage Fenty, they get it, right? I've broken the mold here. I'm not only an art historian, I'm not only a social media influencer, I'm somebody who's actually breaking the mold, creating the mold, what the next mold looks like. And that is incredibly powerful. When you see it, I met her for the first time a few days ago, and then she did a tour of our booth, right? But it's that contact, right? It's that contact, recognizing what's happening on the ground, and again, I think all of us are doing our piece of that. But wow, there are some amazing people that are making their own keys right now, and wow.
And we're connecting through Instagram.
And we're connecting through Instagram. So
some people that I don't think I've ever would have met otherwise. I mean, I love going out there. I love going to galleries, but I'm a bit of like I love sleep. I'm always tired. I love it.
Hey, come on now.
So I love getting to see artists and what they're doing on Instagram. Sometimes it's not always easy for me to like get out there and actually like pound the pavement and visit all these galleries and show openings and everything. But being able to see artists thrive and see what they're doing and connect with them. I mean, I connected with you in person actually. Actually, that's a rarity that I've been connected.
But I was already following you.
But yeah. I mean, this is how we build all of these bridges across the United States, across, you know, these different pathways to each other. It's,
Is this on again? Yeah. I think it's turned off at some point. I wanted to add something actually about an artist that you're showing who I've admired for a long time, and also the way that she uses social media. I don't know if you want to share more specifically, but I'm a huge fan of Larissa de Jesus Negron's work, who you're showing right now at the fair. And I think that the way that she uses social media for storytelling is very powerful. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what she's doing there and how you like work together and leverage that.
So, Larissa de Jesus Negron, she's an artist that's been based in New York for the past 9 years. But recently moved to Puerto Rico. She's been living for the past 10 months there. So social media, likewise with our gallery, comes in a huge play because we're bringing artists from everywhere. We're bringing artists from Mexico. We're bringing artists from the Philippines. We're bringing artists from everywhere, but we're in Puerto Rico. So we want people to get the full experience of our space, even though if we're on an island. And it's likewise with Larissa. She wants you to feel that you're in the studio, even though you can't go to Puerto Rico at the moment. So yeah.
I think that that's always like an important thing to remember, that we're like spoiled for choice here in New York. But even if we might be here in New York, we might not have like, always the time and energy to really go and visit everything. So I think, social media is definitely like a way that we're, should be really, we're it's like a love and hate relationship. But at this point, like, I think I made peace with myself because, growing up, like as a young millennial, or maybe not so young millennial anymore, but millennial. I remember being on my phone and like my mom would always complain that I'm just, playing on my phone. Like, oh, you're just scrolling, it's just Instagram. But like at this point, it really becomes a work tool, and we have to take it seriously that way, because that's a great way to get discovered, a great way to get more visibility that is needed, definitely. I think, we kind of like touched on this one, but I'm curious, why are we still seen as a niche audience, a niche community, when we just like said that we're like 20% of the population in the US? But what's also interesting is that there is spending power of 3.4 trillion of the Latinx community. That's a lot of money. And why do you think are we still seen as a niche when other brands like consumer-facing brands are already spending like huge budgets behind marketing campaigns targeting us? Why is the art world not targeting us?
That is a big question. I'm sure you two could answer this better than I could. You'll solve it. But I everything that I have learned about the art world is about being able to categorize and sell an artist, and it has to be, you're thinking about the marketability of that artist and putting them in a box. You cannot do that with the Latinx community. We are not a monolith. We celebrate in so many different ways. We don't even all speak Spanish, right? And I think that people in power in the art world,
Right.
don't know how to pin us, don't know how to pin and don't want to do the work. That's the issue here. They don't want to do the work. They want it to be easy, so they, I think maybe you have noticed that there are some artists who might be born here, but if they have a certain background, it's easy. It's a little more marketable to say Latin American, or Colombian artist X, Mexican artist Y, because the Latin American art market is a lot stronger than the Latinx market in the U.S. Right? It gets into that. Into those details, and at the end of the day, they just don't want to do the work. But obviously, I'm sure there's a million other reasons for it. That's a big question.
For sure.
I want to add something before you guys continue.
Yeah. Sure.
I think that we are right now in a very, very interesting moment. My bread and butter is kind of trying to understand how to get around the minds of people who are not in the art world and how to convince them to start collecting. So maybe we can think about that as a community, because what we mentioned before, historically we haven't been collectors of art in Latin America because we're not a newer culture, but the colonization and everything that you can envision. It's not the same as the growing up in let's say a German household, which 20 years ago had 20 artworks at home. So we're it's a newer thing for us, even though art is not new to our culture, but the collecting culture is something that still needs to grow in our communities. But right now, what I've seen is that there's so many people who are actually interested in growing and expanding the pie of who is buying art, because I think there's always been this stereotypical, the reason why I didn't feel like I could collect art before was because I'm not an older white millionaire guy, right? That's how it felt. But there are different artworks at different price points that feel more accessible to also maybe not such high earners, and it could reach a little bit more of a mass audience. And I think having these conversations and education and educational sort of conversations like you were mentioning, it's part of the process. We need to start doing the work, and actually I'm very happy to see that in this moment, right now, Art Week, I've seen so many people talking and approaching me saying I love what you're doing. You're educating the next generation of art collectors. But everybody wants to be doing that now. And I think it's a very important moment because when we start creating the new generation of art collectors, we all grow together. So it's kind of this journey and learning process that it doesn't matter if your parents didn't collect art, my parents didn't collect art, and now I have the average of an average household in Germany 20 years ago. So it's something that is coming, and we are growing together. And I think, like you mentioned before, growing pains, it's a good thing. A good thing. But I think I kind of drifted away from the question, but now.
No. My God, this is such a
solve it. Figure it out.
Solve this,
Steve,
right?
solve this.
Okay, let me try. Geez, I think two things can be right at the same time, right? Where we are feeling this energy, right? This energy's on this panel. I feel embodied right now talking about this, right? So all of that groundswell could be happening, but at the same time, in the contemporary art context, there aren't, again, I use that word key holders, but it's very true. There aren't many of us that have broken through at these institutions, right? That can help celebrate people like us, right? But we're breaking through, right? We're breaking through. And I think we're feeding off that optimism. We're feeding off of that energy, right? We're seeing Karen, we're seeing Dr. Margarita Rosa, we're seeing the work that continues to be done at El Museo del Barrio that has been doing it from the 70s before I was even born, right? But going back to this idea of critical mass, right? So why I bring this up is that there's this amazing artist, Simone Leigh, right? She shows at Loring Augustine, right? She was at the Venice Biennial, just a few years ago. And she talked about how she felt like African American artists had hit critical mass. And this idea that it wasn't just instances in the art world, but now they were in every single possible demographic in terms of touching institutions, touching emerging collectors, touching middle to established collectors, that now the market had embraced them, right? So what we're doing is we're now as Latinos we're reaching out to other curators, to other people that are underground, and we ask them, have we hit critical mass? And they report back, not even close, right? We have not tapped or touched that threshold yet. And I think that's an interesting, that's why this conversation I think is happening today, because it's a real snapshot of what's happening. Although there's that energy, although there's that groundswell, although social media is exposing us to the world, there's heavy lifting that still needs to be done.
Yeah.
So.
I do. So speaking in the fact that we haven't reached that critical mass, and yes, as a community, we need to support ourselves and lift ourselves.
Sure.
But at the same time, you're talking about like the gatekeepers, and that very much is part of it.
Sure.
But, you know, and this is, I know, I understand happening very, very slowly, but when you have someone like Marcela Guerrero,
Yeah.
Carmen Ramos, who is heading the curatorial department at the National Gallery of Art,
Sure.
Taina Caragol, who is at the National Portrait Gallery, and they are very specifically have the background in Latinx art and really making connections and opening doors intentionally, and those are positions of power. Now they are, you know, 3 women are not going to change the world. We have to like come and help them too. It's all of us, but that's not nothing, right?
Oh, no.
That is, so we are getting there. Slowly but surely.
Karen, let me add to that too, and again, it's like celebrating not only our stories, but like celebrating our individual voices. I think that's what gets me up in the morning, right? That I get to go on Instagram and I get to see Karen and like, okay, what is Karen doing today? Where is she going? She's sleeping, but then you're like, right? Like, what's the project? How is she going to celebrate the Mets collection in the way Karen does it, right? In that flair, in that directness, in that optimism, in that care. And I think that's another thing that's important about this discussion is we're handling our ancestry, or like I think all of us want to handle that with generosity, with tender care, right? Because again, I think you're specifically. This goes back to you and like coming from Mexico, and this is like careful work, right? When working with Latinx artists, you want to treat that ancestry, that culture, that heritage, propel it into the present, propel it into the future, but with tenderness, with care, and that gives me chills too. Yeah.
Do you want
Well, thank you very much. Just keeping an eye on the time. I don't know if there are any questions from the audience or any additional. We have a question. I can't hear, so.
Do you guys find this just speaking on the situation here in the U.S.? Because I know Mexico has a huge art world, and I feel like Mexico has in some one of the top world's areas of like galleries and art. So do you guys think this is more like the U.S.
Absolutely.
issue?
In terms of celebrating Latinx work, or just
Like,
the day?
our representation, how is it 2% so low versus like other parts of the world?
the gallerists, but I will say I think it is specifically in the United States because the Latin American market is very strong. Now I won't speak to the details of that because I'm sure that there are certain sectors, countries, cultures that are not maybe as represented as others. You know, Mexican artists, very strong presence, Colombian artists, very strong presence, but I think overall generally the Latin American market compared to the Latinx artists in the United States, right, specifically, it's very unequal, very uneven. Yeah. But that's also by design.
Yeah. I'm going to add something to this.
Sure.
Well, actually, I mean, there's something to say about Mexico and the gallery scene. Like, I think there's a large concentration of galleries and a lot of culture and a lot of like international traffic as well in Mexico City, but not the whole country. I mean, one of my dear friends, and we have co-curated projects together. She's in a border town called Matamoros, and there are no galleries there. So I think there is a lot of work to be done, and there's also like not this culture of collecting either. So similar to what we're all doing, it's kind of like taking the hands of like these people who are interested in culture, but they don't know that they can collect. So it's still, like even though it might seem like a very strong and powerful market, I don't think that, it has reached kind of like the whole sort of country. And there are definitely those pockets of like highly condensed and like, obviously we have Sonamaco and like we have a lot of international presence, but like does it sustain throughout the year? Probably not, right? Like there's a lot of eyes on Mexico City during Sonamaco, but then it kind of goes away again. And I mean, it's also an interesting place because it's so close to the US, and I feel there's so much like back and forth, especially like with the pandemic. But I feel like the US market is like a very interesting and specific like art market. So prices here are a lot higher. There's something that we were discussing, and it makes sense because the rent of the artist is really expensive. The materials are really expensive. The rent of the galleries is really expensive. Participating in an art fair is expensive. So it's not just, because it's a, Latinx artist that they're based in the US that, it's unfair that their pricing is so much higher. Like it is actually justified by their cost of living. But it's also maybe making it a little inaccessible for people who are not earning dollars. So it's a little bit of an imbalance. But yeah, so when I started collecting artists who were based in Mexico, because their prices were more affordable to me in making dollars, and I don't make a lot of money, so there is this kind of discrepancy on the pricing, and maybe that's also why it seems a little bit more accessible. Like I also hear from people going to fairs in Mexico City that international galleries don't sell as well as the local ones, but that might also be a question of pricing. Yeah. Is there another question?
That's a great question, by the way, though. That's a great question. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being here for your journey. I don't know all of you, but I know some of you, and I know the huge labor that you're doing to promote our culture. I'm Mexican Cuban from Tijuana, I'm living here. And my question to you is, as an emerging artist, what from Latin America, what are your recommendations? Because I know there's a couple fellow artists here. How do you get discovered? How do you, I know it's constant, you have to put yourself out there, you have to go to the fairs, you have to go to the meetings, to the talks, but what are your on-field, top 5 things of, how do we actually make it?
Oh my God. So this is great, right? I think this is another reason why we're here, right? I mean, my goodness, it's really about like tapping into us, right? Tap into this network, right? Reach out to us and let's go get that cup of coffee. Let's go get that sandwich. Instagram, right? Like I don't know how many people I've called. It's not creepy, yeah. So
don't listen to those.
Yeah, don't listen to that. You know what I mean? Like, again, right? Karen and I met through Instagram. You know what I mean? Just kind of like pinging each other back.
Just seeing the work, right? Like seeing, oh, look at what you're doing. This is incredible. Like.
Yeah.
Start the conversation.
Let's catch up. Ooh, I want to learn more. I mean, it's not creepy.
Yes, it's not creepy.
Because usually it's like, don't approach the curator. Don't approach. There's like this invisible wall of saintliness that many times, and when you try, sometimes you're ignored. So you're like, these are the things that you should do. I mean, nowadays I feel that you just walk up to someone and ask them, especially for New York City. But in other places, it's like, no, you have to be introduced. You have to,
Yeah.
So let me just say right there, throw that out the window. Yeah, in 2025, throw that out the window.
That is an elitist hierarchy that we need to get rid of, and that keeps us out of those spaces.
Oh yeah, right? Like, we're no part of that, yeah. It's almost like, how we're on the ground, and I think I could say that in terms of like, we are all people that are on the ground, right? In terms of like, in order for us to develop that eye, right, to be celebrating social media, to be a social media advocate, to be a gallerist, to be coming to art fairs and being champions, you kind of have to be out there. You've got to reach out to us. You've got to reach out to us and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm making, this is what I'm doing, and be your own advocate. And then I'll recognize that, and they'll say, you know what, something is happening here. I've got to come over, or right, I've got to see what's going on, and then that's when those relationships are made. You know. Yeah.
I actually want to add something
Yeah.
to this because I do think that that's totally right, but there's also some beauty to this like natural connection and like showing up. Last year, I was also participating with with Future Fair in the programming, and also did a tour of the Latinx spaces and the Latinx artists who were showing. So there were, I believe, like 2 spaces that were not. There were Canadian, and I believe 2 Canadian galleries that were showing Latinx artists, and then there were some Latinx-led galleries. And Manuel came to the tour, who is a friend of mine, who's also an artist. And then I saw that Manuel had worked with Steve. So that's how they met. So, like keeping an eye out for, like, I don't know, like Vixie, for example, is like now up in the exhibition with the Latinx project, and then NYU, kind of like, approaching these spaces, like, going, like, reach out to Vixie and be like, hey, I would love to come and see the exhibition that you're part of. And then you start to, like, insert yourself in that community, but like in a very natural way, and it's not fake because we all are Latinx and we all want to support each other. I feel like that sort of like connection goes a long way.
Sure.
And this, I may not have directly introduced Manuel to Steve and say like, hey, Steve, like Manuel is like an incredible artist, but Manuel came to my tour, and then that's how they got to see each other in a very sort of like natural way, and then like something was born out of that. Can you tell us a little bit about like how that happened? Because I only saw it like in person. I was like, whoa.
So I forgot about this.
Yeah.
Actually, you got Manuel and I like connected. So Ida's doing a tour. She did a tour of our booth, right? And again, right, being a champion of Latinx artists, what a wonderful opportunity. And I think Manuel, after the tour, reaches out to me on social media and just says hello. And I was so struck by the work. I think I was in the studio like a week later, right? So this is in May, and then I'm showing him at Nada Miami in December, and we sold out his work, and we got the work into the Gottman collection, which is like a collection in New York City and Orlando, or like in Miami, but they celebrate indigenous artwork, and it's over 400 works large, right? But it took a tour to kind of connect us, and it took a social media post or like just a message, and then the work was just so overwhelming. It brought me to a studio, and that's what happened. And I forgot about that. So I thank you.
I didn't forget.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think we are going to say now goodbye, but thank you to everyone, unless somebody has like a very pressing question.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the